The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, the screen lighting up with the utility company's final warning. I stared at it for a long moment, the weight of the $350 balance pressing down like a stone in my chest. I knew no one else would step up. Frankie never did. And so I opened my banking app and transferred the money from my savings, the same way I'd done countless times before. It was just another quiet sacrifice. One more bill paid without a word of thanks. I am Charlotte Anderson, an elementary school teacher who's spent the last 8 years carrying my fractured family on my back. While most see me as the quiet one, the invisible thread holding everything together, I am the silent provider, the emotional anchor. Frankie, my stepmother, sat across from me at dinner last night, her eyes cold, dismissive whenever I mentioned the household budget or the mounting expenses. "You always worry too much, Charlotte," she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the tense atmosphere like a knife. I swallowed the impulse to argue and nodded instead, pretending to believe that maybe she was right. Maybe I was imagining the growing distance between us, the subtle way she sidelined me in family decisions. But deep down, I felt the sting of rejection, the gnawing discomfort of being unacknowledged in my own home. That afternoon, I caught myself glancing at the faded envelope hidden in my desk drawer, the deed to the lakeside cabin my late mother left me, a secret kept close to my heart. It was a fragile lifeline, a reminder that I belonged somewhere beyond the cold walls of this family. I hadn't told anyone about the cabin. It felt like my last quiet power, one I wasn't sure how or when to use. For now, I held on to a quiet optimism, believing that my loyalty and sacrifices might one day earn me a place of respect in this family. But the reality felt heavier every day, like I was fading into the background, unnoticed and unvalued. I often wonder if they see me at all. When I'm not the one fixing forgotten repairs or covering unpaid bills, I'm the one people come to with their problems, especially Frankie's children. They don't thank me, they just expect it. I am the shadow behind this family's fragile facade, the one who bears the burden without complaint. Yet, despite the chill in the air, I keep hoping for a moment where I am seen, not just for what I do, but for who I am. Maybe that's my greatest secret power, holding on to hope when everything else tells me to give up. The memory is sharp, like a slap that never quite healed. I was 16, sitting at the edge of the living room floor during that Christmas dinner. Frankie's eyes sparkled as she handed out gifts to her children, Lisa and Eric, each wrapped in glossy paper, topped with perfect bows. Their faces lit up with excitement, while I received a plain box, barely concealed, with a sweater that seemed to have been bought at the last minute. The look on my father's face was pained, but resigned, as if caught between wanting to defend me and maintaining a fragile peace. Frankie's smile never faltered, but her words cut deeper than the cold December air. "You have to learn to move on from the past, Charlotte," she said softly, almost kindly, but the message was clear. I didn't belong. Over the years, the subtle put-downs grew sharper. Frankie's favorite lines became a soundtrack to my life. "You're holding on to things no one else cares about." Or, "Maybe if you stopped living in yesterday, you'd find your place here." I told myself it was tough love. That acceptance required endurance. But one moment still haunts me. The day she threw away the handmade Christmas card I had made for my mother. The card filled with clumsy drawings and heartfelt words. "Childish nonsense," Frankie scoffed, crumpling it in her hand before tossing it into the trash. I stood frozen, numb, as if a piece of my soul was discarded along with that card. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but I swallowed the pain and kept smiling, convincing myself that family meant sacrifice. I told myself to be strong, to be patient. Maybe one day they would see me, not just as an inconvenient reminder of the past, but as someone worthy of love and respect. Yet, the memory, sharp and bitter, has never left me, a constant reminder of the distance between who I am and who they want me to be. Even now, I wonder if that night marked the moment they truly stopped seeing me as their daughter and started seeing me as an outsider, a threat to their carefully constructed family narrative. I've quietly paid more than $120,000 over the past 5 years to keep this family afloat, Mortgage payments, groceries, medical bills, it's all piled up on my shoulders like an invisible burden. I remember canceling a trip to the coast last summer, telling Daniel it was just a work thing, when really I was covering an unexpected hospital stay for Eric. Daniel, my husband, has been my rock. Practical, supportive, always asking if I'm okay. "Do they even appreciate what you're doing?" he would ask gently during those quiet late-night talks. I'd shrug, telling him that love should be enough. But sometimes, even I wonder if it really is. Caring for aging relatives, sacrificing weekends to drive my sister Lisa to therapy sessions, juggling lesson plans with family emergencies, it's a relentless balancing act. Yet, I never complain. I convinced myself that these sacrifices were part of being the eldest, the one who holds the family together. I kept my mother's lakeside cabin a secret, a small sanctuary deeded to me but untouched by the family's drama. It's a place of peace, where I can breathe without fear of judgment or dismissal, a place that belongs entirely to me. Lisa, my sister, remains caught in the middle, her loyalty divided, but her heart heavy. Eric, my stepbrother, is protective of his mother, but sometimes seems confused by the tension under our roof. Frankie, cold and calculating, rules the family with an iron grip, favoring her children and pushing me to the edges. Daniel watches it all from the sidelines, quietly worried for me. Despite the weight of it all, I cling to the hope that love, even if unspoken, could heal these wounds. For now, I carry my burdens silently, a quiet force holding this fractured family together. The room buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses at Lisa's engagement party, the family home filled with voices and music. I wore my usual polite smile, trying to blend into the background as Frankie took the floor for a toast, her eyes locked on me, cold and sharp. "And to the forgotten daughter," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "who always seems to vanish when help is needed." The words landed like a slap, freezing the air. I felt every head turn toward me. Some relatives chuckled nervously, others averted their eyes. My heart pounded painfully in my chest, a raw ache spreading through my limbs. I forced myself to smile, swallowing the sting. My hands trembled slightly as I raised my glass, trying to appear unshaken. Inside, a storm of confusion and hurt churned. Why now? Why here? But I told myself it was just Frankie's stress, a cruel joke in poor taste. I couldn't let her see me break. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with discomfort. I noticed Lisa's eyes flicker with pity, and Daniel's jaw tighten in quiet anger. Still, I said nothing, willing the moment to pass. When the party buzz faded into the background, I quietly slipped out of the room, declining the drink Frankie offered with a strained smile. It was the first time I refused her, a small act of defiance that felt like a crack in the walls I'd built around myself. Though the wound throbbed, I clung stubbornly to hope. Maybe this was just a moment, not a pattern. Maybe respect and kindness were still possible. But as I stood alone in the hallway, the laughter behind the closed doors sounded hollow, a reminder that my place in this family was more fragile than I'd ever admitted. After that quiet refusal at the party, I thought maybe Frankie would back off, but that was naive. The very next day, whispers started swirling like smoke in the family circles. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts and calls from relatives I used to consider allies, now suddenly distant, their voices hesitant, loaded with doubt. "Charlotte, are you sure you're not overreacting?" Uncle Harold asked one afternoon, his tone laced with weary admonishment. He had always been the steady, neutral presence, but now even he was urging me to just let things go, as if my pain was a nuisance rather than a truth. I could almost hear Frankie's voice behind it all, her venomous smile as she spun tales painting me as selfish and overly sensitive. "She makes everything about herself," a cousin whispered during a family brunch. The worst part was how it made me question myself. Sitting alone in my room that night, I pressed my palms to my temples, feeling a dizzying swirl of doubt. Maybe I am the problem, I thought, swallowing the bitter pill. I remembered Frankie's chilling words during that lunch, when she leaned over the table and said with icy certainty, "You've always been too sensitive. This family has done more for you than you realize." Her words weren't just cruel. They were a calculated push to isolate me, to make me second-guess my right to stand up for myself. The most painful part was watching my circle shrink as relatives who once leaned on me for comfort now glanced away, wary of getting involved. Lisa looked torn in her silence, while Eric's smirks grew sharper, like blades cutting through any hope I had left. It was like watching a slow erosion of my identity, piece by piece, replaced by the smears and lies Frankie so casually spread. I fought to hold on to my truth, but the walls were closing in. Each day, the tension mounted, a relentless ping-pong match where any resistance I offered was met with harsher denial and manipulation. I felt trapped in a storm of gaslighting, the eye of which was Frankie's calculating gaze, cold and unyielding. Desperation clawed at me, but I knew I couldn't crumble yet. I just didn't know how much longer I could survive this, when even my own family seemed to turn their backs. The silence that followed her words was deafening, and as I sat there, the question haunted me. Was I really too sensitive, or was this the cruelty of a woman trying to erase me? The answer felt out of reach, lost in the growing shadows she cast. Determined not to let this rot fester in silence, I reached out for what seemed like the last thread of hope, a peaceful conversation with Frankie. I requested a private meeting, hoping to clear the air and find some middle ground, inviting Margaret Willis, our family attorney, to act as a neutral witness. The day of the meeting, I arrived early, nerves twisting in my stomach like a vice. I laid out everything calmly. My contributions, the sacrifices I'd made, my grief over how we'd drifted apart. "I just want to be acknowledged," I said, voice steady despite the lump in my throat. But the moment Frankie walked in, the atmosphere shifted. Her eyes shimmered with false tears as she launched into a rehearsed tale of victimhood. "You don't know how hard this has been for me," she sniffled, voice cracking. "Your constant accusations. How can I live with this bitterness?" She painted herself as the wounded party, turning the table on me with Oscar-worthy performances that made my heart ache. Then, she threatened with chilling calmness. "If you keep this up, Charlotte, you'll find yourself cut out of this family." Margaret hovered uneasily, offering no comfort, instead pointing out the lack of formal agreements and hinting that legally, Frankie's children were prioritized. That cold reminder felt like a slap. I left that room feeling hollow, the last vestige of hope for peace dimming to a flicker. I'd come seeking understanding, but found only walls thicker than before. The meeting was supposed to be a step forward, but instead, it crystallized a harsh truth. The family's authority figures had already chosen their side. I swallowed the sting of defeat, but didn't voice it. I still clung to some fragile hope for change, though the pain behind it was growing sharper every day. Just when I thought the humiliation couldn't deepen, it did, publicly and painfully. I was volunteering at the community fundraiser, a place I loved, surrounded by colleagues, friends, and Daniel beside me, when Frankie struck. Her voice rose sharply across the chatter, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let's not forget Charlotte's family history," she jeered, cold and cruel. "Her mother's weakness with illness. It's no wonder Charlotte never learned resilience." The words hung in the air like a guillotine's blade, slicing through the respect I'd built over years. I felt my face burn with shame as stunned silence fell. Daniel's hand gripped mine tightly, his jaw clenching in fury. Whispers erupted, doubt, questions about my reliability, murmurs of, "How can she handle stress?" and "Maybe she's too fragile for teaching." Eric's sneering laughter cut deeper than any knife, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Colleagues I'd trusted now kept their distance, the warm smiles replaced by cold glances. The stain on my reputation spread quickly, and I could see Daniel's worry grow with every passing moment. He later confronted Frankie, voice low but fierce, warning her to stop. But Frankie just shrugged, unapologetic, her cruelty deliberate and cold. That moment shattered something inside me. This wasn't accidental or thoughtless. It was a calculated attack meant to break me publicly and professionally. The humiliation wasn't just emotional anymore. It had tangible repercussions echoing through my life. I stood there, trembling, but silent, the weight of her betrayal pressing down like a physical force. I realized then that this wasn't just about family drama. It was about control, dominance, and erasure, and I was the target. Desperate for some final chance to heal the rift, I picked up the phone late that night and dialed Frankie's number. My voice was soft but firm as I offered forgiveness, hoping to open a door she might close. "I want to rebuild trust," I said quietly. "I need you to recognize what I've done. For the family, for Mom's memory. I need respect, Frankie. That's all I'm asking." The silence on the line stretched unbearably before her voice returned, cold and cutting. "You're selfish," she spat. "Always holding on to the past like it's your shield." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat as she went on, her words sharp and final. "If you want to belong here, you'll stop this bitterness. Otherwise, I'll erase you from the family records. You don't exist to us." The threat wasn't just harsh. It was a death sentence to the connection I so desperately wanted. I closed my eyes, the sting of rejection slicing deep. But beneath the pain, a quiet resolve settled in. I did everything I could. I had shown grace, patience, and love. Now I understood. Some battles aren't won with words or forgiveness. Sometimes, you just have to survive. The days that followed the failed call felt like I was sinking deeper into a pit with no ladder to climb out. The isolation was suffocating. Messages from relatives that once brought warmth now came with hesitant distance, their words wrapped in caution or veiled criticism. The support I'd counted on, financial and emotional, slowly eroded. Invitations to family events stopped altogether. It was as if I had become invisible, a shadow lurking in the background no one wanted to engage with. The sting wasn't just the absence, but the certainty that they had chosen sides. And mine wasn't the one they embraced. Daniel remained my anchor, the solid ground beneath my feet. But even our usual circle felt smaller, quieter, as if the tension in my world was bleeding into theirs. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit alone in our dimly lit living room, the silence pressing in on me, the weight of loneliness mixed with doubt, gnawing at my confidence. Maybe I really am the problem, I thought, my mind replaying every sharp word, every cold glance, every subtle exclusion. The exhaustion settled deep in my bones, dragging me down into a muddled haze of sadness and confusion. Yet beneath that fog, something quietly shifted. The sharp edges of pain dulled just enough to clear a space for something new, an unspoken understanding forming in the quiet. It wasn't hope in the way I'd known before, fragile and fleeting, but a cooler, more calculating clarity. The emotional turmoil wasn't gone, but it was no longer blinding me. I could see the situation, the family, and Frankie's role in it all with fresh eyes, not through the lens of yearning for acceptance, but through the cold light of truth. The seed of transformation had taken root, silent but resolute. The family meeting Frankie called was supposed to be a chance to finally air grievances, maybe find some resolution. Instead, it became the scene of my ultimate unraveling. Frankie's smug smile as she revealed the secret alteration to my late father's will felt like a punch to the gut. Without my knowledge, my inheritance rights had been erased, vanished like they'd never existed. My heart hammered painfully in my chest as I tried to steady my voice, but the betrayal sliced through me deeper than words could express. Then came the cruel revelation about the box of letters. My mother's handwritten notes spanning years, memories etched in ink, discarded as clutter. Frankie's casual dismissal of something so sacred struck me like a cold slap. "It's time to move on," she said with chilling finality, as if erasing my mother's love could erase me too. The room was silent, except for the faint shuffle of papers and the shallow breaths of those watching. Lisa's eyes were wide, full of shock. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides, but I felt nothing outwardly, my face hardening into a mask of cold detachment. Inside, I felt the last fragments of hope shatter. The person I had been, the one who wanted peace, who sought acknowledgement, broke apart. The veil lifted, revealing the stark reality. This was no longer a battle for acceptance, but a war for survival. The loss was concrete, irreversible. I swallowed the lump in my throat and thought with a voice sharper than any scream, "This ends now." The room felt suffocating, but within me, A new resolve began to form, ice cold and unwavering. Later, in the solitude of my study, I sifted through the wreckage of my trust and memories, each one a quiet wound reopened. The pain was raw and simmering, but beneath it simmered a fierce anger I hadn't allowed myself before. I went through the moments again, every sacrifice ignored, every kindness turned to scorn. "This has always been this way," I whispered aloud. I just didn't want to see. The grief that had once felt like drowning now sharpened into a blade of clarity, cutting through the fog of denial. My gaze fell on the small box of keepsakes next to my desk. Photos, mementos, and the deed to the lakeside cabin, a place I had kept secret and untouched. That cabin, once a symbol of memory and peace, suddenly felt like a weapon in waiting. For the first time, I allowed myself to think beyond survival, to strategize. This was no longer about being the quiet, enduring daughter. It was about protecting what was mine, about not giving away any more pieces of myself without a fight. "Never again," I said firmly, voice steady, the transformation complete. The victim inside me had closed the door. The strategist was ready to step through. That night, Daniel and I sat quietly in the living room, the weight of what I'd learned resting heavy between us. I laid out my thoughts, not as a desperate cry, but as a calculated plan. No more silent sacrifices, no more giving without receiving. It was time to withdraw, to cut off the lifelines the family depended on. Financial help, emotional labor, the countless supports I'd provided. Frankie was the heart of this control, and she would be the focus of dismantling her grip. Daniel nodded, his eyes steady and supportive. "Measured steps," he said. "Control everything you can. Don't let anger make decisions for you." His calm reassured me, grounding the storm inside my mind. We agreed to reach out to Margaret Willis discreetly, to understand the legal boundaries and secure what was rightfully mine. This wasn't about petty revenge. It was about carving out a future on my terms. As I looked at him, I felt a shift inside, a rising tide of empowerment replacing the exhaustion. The narrative was changing. I was no longer a pawn in their game. I was taking control. The quiet hum of the late afternoon filtered through my home office window as I spread out the documents on my desk, the weight of each paper pressing down on me more heavily than the last. Mortgage statements, utility bills, credit card records. I had always kept these close, a silent ledger of my contributions to the family's stability. But today, with Margaret's advice fresh in my mind, I was no longer just filing them away. I was dissecting them, searching for cracks. What emerged was clearer than I'd expected. Frankie's financial chaos lay bare in black and white. Unpaid debts stacked up beyond what I'd imagined, and worse, charges on my credit cards she'd made without a word. The betrayal cut deeper as I realized the family's fragile existence had leaned more on my shoulders than I'd allowed myself to see. Margaret's voice echoed in my memory, calm but firm. "You have more leverage than you think, Charlotte. It's not just about money. It's about control. And right now, the balance is in your favor." I examined the family's dependencies carefully. The lakeside cabin and my exclusive access, the steady stream of mortgage payments I'd shouldered, and the utilities tangled under my name. Even the social reputation, carefully curated by Frankie's false narratives, depended heavily on my quiet support. I jotted notes, marking details that would matter in a confrontation. Overdue notices, her evasive text replies, the discarded letters I'd recovered, each piece a thread in the tapestry of control she wielded so arrogantly. "This isn't just about money," I murmured, heart thudding in my chest. "They need me more than I need them." The realization was both empowering and chilling. For years, I'd believed I was the one desperate for acceptance, the one clawing for family. Now the truth crystallized. Frankie's empire was built on my sacrifices, and without me, it would crumble. I leaned back, letting the afternoon light wash over my face, feeling a strange mix of sorrow and steely determination. It was a map, a blueprint for the reckoning I was quietly assembling. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the faintest flicker of hope beneath the weight of betrayal. Later, I called Margaret again, her voice a steady anchor. "Make copies of everything," she instructed. "Bank statements, correspondence, Any proof of her misuse of your credit. This is your ammunition." I nodded silently, the resolve settling in deeper. This was no longer about proving my worth. It was about exposing the truth, about reclaiming what was mine by right and necessity. I spent the evening compiling, sorting, photographing. The soft rustle of papers and the occasional click of the scanner filled the room, a quiet symphony of preparation. Each page was a victory, each discovery a step toward dismantling the facade Frankie had built. My fingers trembled occasionally, but my voice was steady when I whispered to myself, "This time, I'm the one holding the cards." The house was silent except for my breathing. Steady, deliberate, unyielding. The nights that followed were a careful dance of silence and action. Passwords changed quietly while Frankie watched television in the next room, oblivious to the small but crucial power shift unfolding beneath her nose. I updated legal documents with Margaret's guidance, ensuring my name was the one tied to every account and asset. Each click, each signature was a silent declaration. Control was mine now. Yet outside, I maintained the facade of normalcy, smiling at family dinners, exchanging pleasantries at gatherings, pretending the storm wasn't building inside me. The calm was deceptive. I could feel the tension beneath my skin, a slow burning heat as I watched Frankie's careless confidence in every gesture, every word. To the world, I was still the dutiful daughter, the loyal supporter, but beneath that mask, I was sharpening my resolve, preparing for the moment when the balance would tip unmistakably in my favor. Patience, I reminded myself in quiet moments. This is the calm before the storm. I could almost hear the distant thunder of consequences gathering, ready to roll through the family's fragile peace. In those quiet hours, Daniel's steady presence grounded me. "You're doing the right thing," he said one evening, his voice soft but unwavering. "Keep your head. Let them never see you sweat." I nodded, grateful for his faith. It was strange, maintaining warmth while plotting the inevitable fracture, but I knew this was the only way. The family needed to believe I was still the Charlotte they'd tried to diminish, the compliant shadow. That illusion was my shield, the perfect cover for what was coming next. The attic was cold and dusty, the air thick with forgotten memories as I pushed aside old boxes searching for something I hadn't dared to confront before. My heart fluttered uneasily, a mix of dread and hope, as I spotted a faded envelope tucked beneath a loose floorboard, marked in familiar, flowing handwriting. My mother's. The paper crackled softly as I unfolded it, revealing a stack of letters, their edges worn but their love unmistakable. 47 letters my mother had written to me over the years, each one a whisper of her hope, her love, and her pain. Tears pricked my eyes as I read fragments, the warmth of her voice cutting through the cold silence Frankie had tried to impose. But it was the faded draft beneath the letters that stole my breath, a worn, unsigned will that my father had once intended to formalize. It named me as the sole heir to the lakeside cabin and a trust fund, a legacy deliberately erased by Frankie's interference. The realization hit like a physical blow, years of manipulation and lies, a quiet rewriting of my family's history that had robbed me of what was rightfully mine. My hands trembled as I held the paper, the evidence of betrayal, tangible and undeniable. Rage bubbled under my skin, but beneath it, something colder and more focused took root. "This changes everything," I whispered, voice steady despite the tumult inside. The letters, the will, they weren't just proof of Frankie's deceit. They were a lifeline, a reclamation of my place in the family and the legacy stolen from me. I felt the weight of my mother's love settle around me, anchoring me in a storm I was no longer afraid to face. The betrayal was deeper than I'd imagined, but so was my resolve. This hidden truth didn't just justify my fight, it demanded it. I carefully packed the letters and will, securing them where no one could find them but me. My mind raced with possibilities, the gravity of what I'd uncovered fueling a surge of purpose. The battle wasn't just about recognition anymore. It was about justice, about setting the scales right. "I will not be erased," I vowed quietly. The attic's stale air seemed to pulse with new energy, as if the past itself was whispering its support. I folded the envelope carefully, my fingers steady now, ready for the next move. With quiet determination, I initiated the first phase of my plan. The familiar comfort of paying the family's utilities was replaced by deliberate silence, bills left unpaid, accounts frozen under my control. I canceled credit card access quietly, severing the financial lifelines that Frankie and her children had long depended on. The shift was almost imperceptible at first, a small crack in the facade, but it spread quickly. Notices began to pile up, and the strain started to ripple through the family's carefully maintained surface. Frankie's reaction was immediate but muted. She scrambled to contact service providers, her voice rising in frustrated phone calls that I could only imagine. The tension crept into family conversations, the undercurrent of inconvenience and confusion growing with each missed payment. Yet no one could trace it back to me. I stayed calm, unshaken, the outward picture of composure masking the storm I had set in motion. I spoke at gatherings with the same gentle tone, the same cautious smiles, but inside, I was a quiet force reshaping the family's foundation. Daniel noticed the change in me, a new, unshakable resolve that replaced the old vulnerability. "You're stronger than they think," he said quietly one evening, his eyes searching mine. "Keep that calm. It's your power." His words fortified me. I knew this was only the beginning. The family's dependence on me was their weakness, and I was beginning to reclaim the balance. Each missed payment, each denied request, was a message they couldn't ignore. The tide had shifted, and I was no longer willing to be the invisible support beneath their crumbling world. The cold withdrawal was deliberate, surgical. It was a quiet revolution within the family, one that Frankie would soon understand, whether she wanted to or not. As I watched the first cracks appear in her confident veneer, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. This wasn't about cruelty. It was about survival and justice. The power dynamics were changing, and I was finally the one holding the reins. The game had begun, and I was ready to play it on my terms. The room was thick with tension the moment I entered. The polished mahogany table gleamed under the overhead lights, reflecting the faces around it. Lisa's guarded skepticism, Eric's wary curiosity, and Frankie's cold, unreadable expression. I placed the folder with the letters and the will draft in front of me, my hands steady despite the tight knots in my stomach. "We need to talk," I began, voice calm but carrying a weight it hadn't before. All eyes locked onto me, and I felt the gravity of the moment compressing the air. No more silent endurance. No more dismissals. This was the reckoning. I unfolded the faded will first, letting the paper catch their eyes like a spotlight on truth. "This draft was never filed," I said slowly, "because Frankie withheld it. My father intended for this cabin, and the trust fund tied to it, to be mine. It's not just property. It's our family legacy, stolen and rewritten." I watched Frankie's face shift, a flicker of panic betraying her usual poise. The room grew silent except for the soft rustle of the letters as I laid them out, each one a testament to my mother's unwavering love, a love Frankie had tried to erase. "These letters confirm everything," I added, "and I'm reclaiming my rightful place. No more financial support to a person who manipulates us all, no more emotional blackmail, and absolute respect for my mother's memory." Frankie's eyes darted around, desperately seeking allies, but the weight of proof was undeniable. "You think this changes anything?" she snapped, but her voice lacked conviction. I met her gaze, unflinching. "It changes everything," I said, voice steady and firm. The shift was palpable, her dominance crumbling like a house of cards under my unwavering calm. I wasn't pleading anymore. I was commanding. Lisa's glance flickered with something between shame and newfound respect. The silence in the room was deafening, signaling that the balance of power had irrevocably tilted. I had taken control, and the family had no choice but to reckon with it. News of the meeting spread quickly, and almost overnight, the fortress Frankie had built began to crumble. Creditors called relentlessly, financial notices piled up, and the once secure family properties suddenly felt like fragile glass. I sat quietly while Daniel handled calls, his support steady beside me, as I ignored the flood of messages from Frankie, apologies tinged with desperation, pleas for reconciliation that I met with silence. The lines were clear now. I would no longer be an emotional or financial lifeline for her or those who enabled her. Relatives who had once accepted Frankie's version of events started reaching out, their voices hesitant but seeking clarity. "Charlotte, can we talk?" Lisa's text appeared unexpectedly one morning, cautious but genuine. I didn't reply immediately. Boundaries had to be rebuilt carefully, brick by brick. The ripple effects were undeniable. Frankie's social circle began to fracture as whispers of her mismanagement and deceit surfaced. The house she had ruled with iron fists was no longer hers. The once untouchable matriarch was exposed, isolated by her own lies, and the truth I had laid bare. Desperation warped Frankie's actions in the weeks that followed. She threatened legal action, her voice rising on the phone as she claimed victimhood in social media posts that painted me as the cold, unjust daughter. Extended family members, once silent or complicit, were enlisted to pressure me, their messages laced with accusations and demands. But I was prepared. Every claim she made was met with calm evidence, every emotional threat countered by my documented proof and legal counsel. I refused to be rattled or drawn back into her toxic web. Lisa's apology came quietly, a hesitant olive branch in the storm. "I'm sorry I doubted you," she admitted in a phone call one afternoon. I listened, careful not to close the door completely but guarded enough to protect myself. Trust didn't rebuild overnight, and the wounds ran deep. Frankie's attempts to manipulate only deepened her isolation. The family's allegiance was shifting, and she was left standing alone as the consequences of her betrayal settled like winter frost. The power she once wielded slipped through her fingers, and for the first time, I saw not a fierce matriarch, but a woman desperate and defeated. 6 months later, my life felt lighter, freer, like I was finally breathing air that wasn't thick with tension and shame. Daniel and I spent weekends at the lakeside cabin, the place that now felt like a sanctuary rather than a battleground. Its worn wood smelled of pine and water, a tangible reminder of the legacy I had fought to reclaim. The weight of family expectations had lifted, replaced by a cautious but growing peace. Contact with Frankie and the hostile relatives was minimal, strictly bounded by terms I set with firm kindness. Lisa and a few others maintained respectful, honest connections, a reflection of partial healing. Sitting on the porch one evening, watching the sun dip behind the trees, I thought quietly to myself, I don't miss the hollow approval I once chased. Peace is worth more. The quiet was no longer empty. It was a space where I could exist on my own terms. The past wasn't erased, but it no longer defined me. I was in control of my story, my family, and my future. That realization, more than anything else, felt like victory. The cabin, the letters, the will, they were more than objects. They were the pillars of my new life, built on truth and quiet strength.